Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webcast today. My name is Andy Lennox. I'm the president of Logix Brands. Today, we're talking for about 25 minutes or so about Halo, the advanced graphite insulation system, and more specifically, Halo Exterra. Today, the presentation will be conducted by Francis Roma. Francis is our technical director here at Logix Brands. Francis has about a 20 to 25-minute presentation. I'll be monitoring questions through the presentation. So as any questions come up, feel free to type them in. Everybody is muted just for a good quality audio experience, but feel free to type in any questions. I'll respond directly to those that I can, and we'll certainly pose as many questions as we can to Francis at the end of the presentation. If we don't have all the questions answered at the end of the presentation, we'll certainly circle back with you afterwards. Alrighty, so without any further ado, Francis, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Andy, and thanks again, everyone, for being with us today for this webcast. Halo Exterra, the advanced breathable exterior insulating sheathing. So what we're going to cover is a quick product overview. We'll get into the features and benefits of using Exterra, compare it to XPS, a look at some cost comparisons, best practices, environmental impacts, the kind of tech support that we can offer, and then we'll end it off with some Q&A. So just a quick background again, my name is Francis Roma, Technical Director for Logix. Logix makes a number of foam building products that includes Heat Sheet, which is an insulated floor panel system designed for in-floor radiant tubing, excuse me, Logix ICF, and Halo rigid insulation board products. We are part of a consortium of leading EPS molders, and together we have the strength of a multinational with nimble and attentive local support and service. Okay, so what is Halo? Halo, as I mentioned, is our line of rigid insulation board products. What makes Halo unique is that the foam insulation is made of GPS. That's graphite infused EPS. So it's basically the white EPS you see today, but with graphite built into it. And that's what gives it its gray color. I'll talk a little bit more about GPS, but for now, just a quick intro into our Halo products. Halo has 3 distinct product lines, and each is designed for specific applications. So we have Interra and Interra FR. Interra has a reflective laminate. Interra FR has a laminate on one side. They're both used for above and below grade interior insulation. The difference between Interra and Interra FR, though, is that Interra FR, you can use it in the interior without an ignition barrier such as drywall. So it's been tested in the US to meet code for this. So if you're looking at insulating your attic or crawl space and you want to leave it exposed, Interra FR is the product for that. We also have Subterra and Subterra Plus. Subterra has a thick polypropylene laminate, and Subterra Plus has a woven polypropylene fabric, both used for below grade and under slab insulation. Subterra Plus, though, is more durable than Subterra because of the laminate that's used, so it can withstand heavier construction traffic and impact loads. So it's more suited for commercial use. It can be used for residential, though, too. And finally, we've got Exterra, which has a perforated reflective laminate, and it's used for above grade exterior insulation. So our Halo products are designed to provide continuous insulation for the entire building envelope. Okay, so for this webcast, we're talking about Halo Exterra. Again, that's used for above grade exterior insulation. It's simply composed of 2 components. That's the GPS foam insulation with the perforated laminate. But with just those 2 components, we're able to create an exterior insulation product that has high R values, yet acts as a permeable water resistant barrier, meaning it's permeable enough to allow the wall assembly to dry to the exterior. This is what makes Exterra unique in the market today, because with rigid insulation products, it's really difficult to get high R values without compromising the breathability or permeability of the insulation. And that's because the higher the R value, the thicker the insulation has to be. But the thicker it is, the less breathable or permeable it is. So with Exterra, we're able to get those high R values comparable to XPS, yet still be permeable enough to let your wall dry to the exterior. So let's go over some of the main features of Exterra. It's increased durability and flexibility, and that's due to the special laminations that we use. It's flexible enough that you can wrap this around most radius walls without having it crack on you. It also provides strong bond for tape sealing joints and penetrations. It has an R5 per nominal inch, which is higher than conventional EPS and at par with XPS. Has a higher vapor permeance. It's perforated, the laminate that is, to allow the insulation to dry. And we can be up to 2 inches thick and still allow for a breathable wall assembly. It's water resistive. The combination of the lamination and the thickness of Exterra has been tested as a water resistive barrier. And it shows that as long as Exterra is 9/16 of an inch or thicker, it can be used without a house wrap. It has a lower water absorption compared to conventional EPS and only about 0.4% more than XPS. Also, there are reflective benefits. It can reflect heat to the exterior, reducing the heat gains during the summer, provided you have a gap between Exterra and the cladding. Okay, so those are just some of the features and benefits. I'm going to get into what GPS is so you get a better understanding of what how it makes Halo a more advanced type of insulation product. So it's made by BASF under the brand name Neopore Plus. It's an advanced form of expanded polystyrene. GPS is conventional EPS with graphite particles. So we know that EPS is a good insulation material because it resists heat flow. But once you add graphite to EPS, it not only resists heat flow, it also reflects and absorbs radiant energy. So it actually increases its R value by up to 30% without actually increasing the thickness. And because of that, it has an R5 per nominal inch. So Neopore is independently tested and certified in US and Canada, and it has Green Guard certification for low chemical emissions. All right, so let's compare GPS against XPS. We can match it for flexural and compressive strengths, but there's 3 properties of GPS we think outperform XPS, and that's the R value, water vapor permeance, and water absorption. Important properties for a healthy wall assembly. Okay, beginning with R values, GPS has a higher long-term R value than XPS. So Neopore GPS provides 0 thermal drift of R value, meaning it has a long-lasting stable R value. It's not going to drastically reduce over time. With XPS, it uses a blowing agent in its production, and that's known to leak over time during its use, so it reduces its R value. And because of that, building codes and testing standards require XPS insulation to state long-term thermal resistance. You'll notice in a lot of these products, their warranties state 90% R value retained long-term. So if we consider that, then XPS long-term R value is R4.5 instead of R5, and that's actually less than GPS. So short-term R values, GPS and XPS are the same. Long-term R values, because GPS retains its R value, it actually has a higher R value than XPS. It's worth noting that there's been developments in the testing standard for insulation products in Canada under ULC S701. They've always recognized that XPS insulation has to test the long-term thermal resistance. Previous versions of this standard allow them to report up to R5 in their data sheets, but that's been reduced from R5 to R4.7. What's worth noting here is that this R4.7 actually represents the R value after 5 years from production. But because XPS is known to lose R value over time during its use, you can expect it to be lower than that beyond 5 years. If you want to know more about this, we do have a tech bulletin on our website that kind of goes into it in more detail. So with GPS, you're actually getting the R value that you expect to last and paid for. All right, with vapor permeance, GPS is more than twice as permeable as XPS. So permeability equals breathability, The more permeable the exterior insulation, the more breathable it will be. The more breathable it is, the higher drying capacity your wall assembly will have. So with Exterra, we perforate the lamination to maintain the high breathability of GPS, and we are breathable even at 2 inches thick. With XPS, it's typically a low permeance material. Even at 1 inch, it can act as a vapor barrier. In Canada and the northern parts of the US, codes require a vapor barrier on the interior side of your wall assembly. But if you use XPS on the exterior as well, then chances are you're putting a low permeance sheathing material on the exterior, which is a potential for a double vapor barrier wall assembly, which we all know can lead to moisture issues. So with XPS, there is more potential to trap moisture in the wall and lower the drying capacity of your wall assembly. Just to compare Exterra against another insulation board, I've got Formular here, which is used in the States, made by Owens. If we look at the perm ratings, Exterra is at 1.3, and that's at 1.5 inches. Formular is pretty low at 0.2, and that's at 1 inch. In Canada, they use Formular C200, and it has a perm rating of 0.8, which in Canada is considered a low permeance material. So in order for your wall to dry properly to the outside, the more breathable your exterior insulation is, the better drying capacity it will have. With Exterra, it's breathable up to 2 inches. With Formular, it's a pretty low permeance material, even at just 1 inch thick. Okay, water absorption. GPS retains less water than XPS. So there's a myth out there that EPS is inferior to XPS because it has a higher water absorption value. It does absorb more water initially because of its high permeance, but because of its high permeance, it doesn't retain all that water. And because of that, it actually does a good job of retaining its R value better than XPS does when you consider long-term conditions. Unfortunately, the testing standard for water absorption is based on short-term testing, so it doesn't reflect any of this. The standard only requires small samples to be immersed in water for up to 5 days and then immediately measured for water absorption. The problem with this test, though, is it doesn't tell you how much water is still left in those samples after a month, a year, or even 2 years from now. So it's not really reflective of real-world conditions. And it wasn't meant to be. This testing standard was meant for quality control purposes during production. And it actually states that in the standard itself. But these are the water absorption values that we have to report in our data sheets. So I think many designers see these values and they get the impression it reflects end-use conditions when it actually doesn't. But what we know from independent studies is that water absorption does have an effect on long-term R value. We know that EPS retains less water than initially absorbed, and that's because of its high permeance. So it may absorb more water during that 5-day test period than XPS, but when you consider long-term conditions, any water that gets in there gets out just as easily. So it does a good job at maintaining its R value. With XPS, it retains absorbed water longer, and that's because of its low permeance. So it may not absorb a lot of water during this 5-day test period, but when you consider long-term conditions, any water that does make its way in there gets trapped in there longer. So as long as the water is sitting in there, it's reducing its R value. One example, there was a 15-year study where samples were buried for 15 years. It showed that the XPS samples on average had 19% water absorption and retained only 52% of its R value. EPS, 5% water absorption and retained 94% of its R value. So basically, EPS, when you consider long-term conditions, actually does a better job at retaining its R value in wet conditions better than XPS does. And basically, what does this all mean? It means that the higher the permeance of rigid insulation, the less water is retained. And so the better drying capacity your wall assembly will have. And this is what GPS can do, I think, better than XPS can. All right, so that's why we chose GPS as our insulation material. for Halo. It provides all the benefits we were looking for the ideal exterior insulation: high stable thermal resistance comparable to XPS. It's more permeable than XPS, and it's a water resistant barrier. It's also a more advanced type of insulation than your conventional EPS, and we think it can outperform XPS when it comes to the R value, permeance, and water absorption. All right, let's move on to environmental impacts when you're using Halo Exterra. We have 6 manufacturing plants in North America. Neopor GPS used in Halo has Green Guard certification. I mentioned this earlier, but basically it's a very rigorous testing program run by UL, and any product that passes this test demonstrates that it doesn't emit any harmful chemicals during its use, either to the occupants or to the environment. So Neopor GPS has Green Guard certification. It's compacted and used in other manufacturing processes and can be ground up and reused as well. It's produced with no harmful emissions. It's produced without the use of CFCs, HCFCs, or formaldehyde. GPS manufacturing also has the smallest carbon footprint out of all rigid foam insulation. If we take a look at this chart, which was taken from the embodied carbon calculator, which is a tool you can use online, it's free. You can go in there and grab products and compare their global warming potential. And so we took Neopor GPS and compared it to the leading EPS products out there. And as you can see, the global warming potential of the leading XPS is 42 times higher than GPS. So if you're looking for a rigid insulation that's more sustainable to the environment, GPS is a good option for that. It's also worth noting that there's been recent regulations in place in the US and Canada that's banned a lot of harmful gases. Some of this is used in XPS insulation. So to address this, there are newer XPS insulation products that meet these new requirements. One of it is 150 NGX by Owens Corning. But if we compare this with Halo Exterra, to manufacture the same volume of board with Exterra, you're still using 326% less embodied carbon, 44% less foam material, and 98.3% less fresh water. So GPS still has a much smaller footprint than their newer XPS insulation products out there. Okay, so we're going to look at a cost comparison here for frame wall assembly and what it's going to cost to upgrade it to include Halo Exterra. So what I've got here is a frame wall assembly with R20 and R24 cavity insulation with building ramp. This gives us an effective R value of R17 and R19. So to upgrade that with Halo Exterra, which is going to replace the building ramp, and we'll keep the cavity insulation at R20. By doing this, we actually boost the R value to R23. So let's see what it's going to cost to make this change. What I've got here is the cost for an R20 frame wall and the R24 frame wall for the same square footage of wall. The R20 will cost around roughly $49,000 and the R24 roughly $53,000. To upgrade it to Halo Exterra, that's going to bump it up by $50,000 to $55,000. So that's about an increase in cost about 14% compared to the R20 frame wall. But with that increase in cost, you're also getting a more energy efficient wall system because using Halo Exterra, you're using continuous insulation on the exterior, and it's boosting your R value by up to 35%. So that's just a quick cost comparison. Obviously, it's going to differ in your region, but it is something to go by. All right, in terms of installation, fastening, typically cap nails, roofing nails, staples with washers as well. Exterra isn't structural, so you could just tack this into place. The cladding or strapping will help secure it. Whatever fasteners you use, though, you do need to use washers with it. For sealing, use construction tape. There's a number of tapes up there that are compatible: tuck tape, Permatac, Permar sheathing, 3M, Venture tape, and Tyvek tape. Use it for all the seams and penetrations. Seal the top edge with caulking, and a regular cut can be sealed with expandable foam. For strength and durability, Exterra is non-structural. The wood sheathing or bracing will add the strength to the wall assembly. Halo is lightweight for easy handling, but extremely flexible and durable against site breakage. There's no seasonal limitations to using Halo Exterra. Just keep your sealants and tapes warm during colder temperatures. For pest control, there's no additives I'm aware of that's available for rigid foams and approved in Canada. So typically your exterior cladding and bug screens will be your first line of defense. In the US, we have Exterra TK series, which has built-in termite protection. That termite protection is ICC approved and has been proven to be more effective than using borate. Cladding options, basically you could put any cladding on this that you would typically do over rigid insulation products. This is just an example of a detail at the foundation level. Here's the foundation. We have Exterra against the wood sheathing. In this example, we've got bug screen where Exterra terminates. We also show wood strapping, and where that terminates, we also show bug screen. At the above grade level, we've got Exterra again against the wood sheathing. With the wood strapping, we show a bug screen wherever it terminates. Oops. And at the roof level, we've got Exterra going up to the baffles. It's easy to cut on site. It's just foam, so you can cut it into any shape you want. Again, seal and tape all your joints and penetrations. And again, we show wood strapping, and where it terminates, we add a bug screen. This is just one example of a detail. Obviously, it can differ wherever you are, and you may not use bug screens. You may have different types of methods to control termite issues. So this is just one example. Okay, so for installation that I just went through, it's really no different than what you would do for any rigid board installation product. So if you're using Halo Exterra and you've used rigid insulation board products, it's a no-brainer. There's no special training involved. In terms of support, we offer on-site support if you haven't used Exterra before. We offer a number of technical services. We're happy to answer any of your calls. It could be related to the building code, construction, structural or architectural. We're happy to answer any questions you have. We do have CAD details. If you can't find a CAD detail you're looking for, then we're happy to work with you to develop a CAD detail that will hopefully work for your project. And we do that in-house. We have all the relevant testing reports and evaluations, technical bulletins, specs and data sheets, an illustrative installation guide, and a technical library. All this information I just talked about, including other items I didn't get to, can be found in our technical library. And lastly, we do have this tool online called the 1-minute R-value calculator. What it does is it basically takes your wall assembly. You can build your wall assembly within this tool, and it'll tell you what the R value is. It will also tell you if it meets the R value for certain climate zones out of the building code in the US and Canada. And you could also go in there and tweak your wall assembly to hit certain R value targets as well. So it's a useful tool and it's worth checking out. We have CCMC and QAI listings. We have been tested to ULC S701 in Canada and C578 in the US. Neopor Plus is also UL listed in US and Canada. We do have local dealers. If you're interested in looking at samples, we can make that available to you as well. All right, so that brings us to the end of the presentation. Hopefully that gave you an idea of what Halo is, how, in particular, Exterra, its features and benefits, how it compares with XPS, the costing and best practices, the kind of environmental impacts you can expect, and the type of support and services that you can expect from us whenever you're using our Halo products. All right, so we're moving on to the Q&A section. We did get some questions ahead of time, so I'm going to answer those first. And then if I didn't get to your question, don't worry, we're going to open up the floor for any further comments or questions. Okay, so how long can Exterra be exposed to sunlight? Uninstalled products are still packaged. They should be covered to protect it. For installed products, we have tested Exterra for UV exposure, and it can be left exposed in direct sunlight for up to 30 days. But in milder weather, you can leave it up longer. But as soon as you notice fading of the print on the laminate, that's when you should consider covering it if you're not expecting to put cladding over it anytime soon. Our installation guide does go into this in more detail on how to protect it during its use and storage. Exterra compared to closed cell spray foam. Well, with exterior insulation, they basically have two different applications between these two. Spray foam, you can use it between the studs, and it's been used with Exterra on the same wall assembly. So the spray foam provides the cavity insulation and the air barrier. Exterra can provide your exterior insulation and your water resistant barrier. So they have been used on the same wall assembly for that purpose. If anything, spray foam, it does have a higher global warming potential than GPS. It's up there with XPS. Can it be used for renovations? If you're removing cladding or whatever exterior finish to your building, that would be a good time to think about installing Exterra. You do have to consider your openings because adding that extra layer of halo and maybe wood strapping, it's going to increase your wall. So are you going to need jam extensions? You have to consider the flashing details as well. I would look through our installation guide because we do talk about this a little more. Examples of strapping around windows. We do have examples in our installation guide. If you don't find what you're looking for, feel free to contact us and we'll help you with whatever we can. All right, so that brings us to the end. What I'm going to do is hand it off to Andy to open up the floor to any comments or questions. Before I do that, I just want to thank you all again for joining us today for this webcast. All right, Andy, over to you.
Thanks, Francis. Cody would like to know if you can apply a one-coat stucco with wire directly on Exterra panels.
You know, we've tested it with one coat stucco with wire. I actually still have a sample here that's been out during the winter, and it's still adhering really well. So I would say that it can, but it hasn't been tested extensively. One method that we've seen used is putting wood strapping and then attaching the wire to the wood strapping, and then adding your base coat and stucco material to that as well.
Any considerations for protection from sunlight, Francis?
Yeah, if you're going to be in hot weather where there's going to be exposed to, direct sunlight, just make sure that it's covered if it's stored. If it's on the wall, make sure there's no anything that can reflect on it. Make sure that's removed. If it's going to be up for more than 30 days, think about covering it. And our installation guide does go into that a little in more detail, so I would kind of refer to that as well.
Okay, Francis. Do we have a Halo product that you'd recommend for under slab installations?
For under slab insulation, we do have Halo products for that. You could use Subterra for under slab insulation. That works great. They're both recognized as vapor barriers as well. So as long as you're taping the joints, it'll act as a vapor barrier. Subterra Plus has been tested and is recognized as a radon barrier too.
Okay. All right. I think that's, oh, and listen, Ben would like to know, um, is there, would you put the WRB, does this function as the water, a weather barrier or a water barrier?
It functions as a water barrier. So it's if you leave it exposed to the rest of the elements for too long, it will degrade the laminate. So that's why we do recommend if you're going to leave it up, don't expose it more than 30 days. But it has been tested extensively as a water resistant barrier.
Okay. Now, everybody, I can let you know that you can download the Xterra installation guide. It's a download in your handout section of your control panel. So if you want further, it's very illustrated and there's lots of great information in that. You can also get a lot more information on the Halo website and the Halo blog. Um, the We had a question, if you're going to do a supplemental house wrap layer, do you do it on the outside or the inside of Xterra? We actually have a blog post on that. You can do both basically, but we have a blog post that details that. And I think we're basically done here, Francis.
Okay.
Uh, and listen, I just want to thank everybody. We're at the end of our time. We're at 11:31 Eastern. Thank you for spending your time with us. You'll be getting an email after this to follow up. And if you have any further questions or you want us to, if we can assist you any further, please indicate so, and we'll do that. If there's any further questions, tap them in, and we'll be sure to follow up with you afterwards. And thanks again. And Francis, the last word to you.
Thanks again, everyone. We appreciate your time and have a great weekend.
Thank you.